And ever since my birth, I found myself unable to even look at horror fiction, especially bad horror fiction. It reminds me too much of that bastard I call a father.
I think what we need here is immersion therapy. Lordstein Serpenstein, you've already grown so much since that lightning storm brought your patchwork corpse of a body to life. Now, we need to push the envelope to the next level.
What must I do?
I've sourced for you one of your father's horrible stories. Read it out loud.
My stomach turns at the thought, but I crave healing and resolution. Very well. Haunt-o-Ween. Juniper Moonbranch pedaled her bicycle through the crumbling streets of Elm Grove as the apricot sun rose into the autumn sky. So much here was so familiar to her. Moonbranch Eatery, Moonbranch Hardware, Moonbranch Moonverse. All of the buildings in this no-horse town were owned by either her family or the Potters. But the Moonbranches had purse strings that matched their sad town, dwindling and decrepit. She glanced at the missing persons posters that lined the shuttered buildings of Old Main Street, passing her like dark images in a macabre flip book. Her high school friend, Alondra, was one of them. She'd gone missing without a trace a year ago, after she and Juniper left the local watering hole, and no one had seen hide nor hair of her since. Alondra's disappearance still haunted Juniper to this day. Juniper brushed it off. She couldn't go into her opening shift with this cloud hovering over her. She steered her bike into the Snippets Craft Depot parking lot, her place of employment, and the only store in town not owned by her family. But when her eyes fell upon the building, she shuddered. When she'd left her shift the night before, the building's acid green paint was glowing in the growing dark. But now, the building was painted black, and a giant sign towered above her in orange letters. Now open. Haunt-o-Ween. Her beloved craft store and place of work had transformed into a Halloween megastore overnight, and no one had thought to tell her this was happening. Would she still have a job at this Halloween warehouse? She needed work to get out of this dead-end town, but how could she work when her work was no longer her job? She sighed, parked her brand-name bike in the employee bike rack, for no one in retail could afford cars, and used her employee-only key to unlock the door. To her surprise, it opened. The Haunt-o-Ween team hadn't changed the locks. It was pitch black inside, and when Juniper tried the light switch, nothing happened. She listened closely for any noises, any sense of human life besides her own. Chilling, ticking, and whirring were the only things that vibrated her auditory nerves. And then, the door opened behind her. Juniper stiffened, wielding her store key like a switchblade. She whipped around, ready to stab this intruder right in their jugular. Whoa! Chill out, Moonbranch! It was her manager, Clay Potter. She didn't know why he worked here. His family had clung onto their wealth like extra-strength name-brand adhesive, but he seemed to enjoy rising up through the craft store ranks. "Why'd you sneak up on me like that?" Juniper asked, lowering her weapon and catching her breath. "I wasn't trying to. I just came to work and found this," Clay said, gesturing around at the gaping maw of the Halloween store. "So you didn't know about it either?" Juniper asked, surprised. Clay shook his head. "I just ordered 6 tons of Snippets fabric. Guess we don't need it now." He ripped off the large sun hat he always wore to protect his alabaster skin. "What is this place?" Juniper whispered. "How did it just spring up without us knowing?" "There may have been a memo," Clay said, feeling desperately around his brain for an explanation like a deep-sea hand fisherman feels around for a salmon that's right at his fingertips. Just then, every light in the building turned on, illuminating the place in ghastly orange and purple light. Aisles upon aisles of packaged costumes greeted them. Animatronic witches, spiders, and Frankensteinian monsters moved their arms and heads like puppets, the source of the whirring Juniper had heard. Silicone bats flapped their wings from above, hanging from wires. And then, an eerie female voice erupted from all around them.
Juniper, Clay, welcome. Please clock in for your shift.
So she did still have a job. That answered one question. Okay, Clay said, stepping deeper into the store, toward the break room. What if it's a trap? Juniper whispered, pulling him back. A trap for what? Clay asked, confused. Come on, Moonbranch, I need this check. He shook her off and kept walking. She hesitated and followed him. But halfway to the break room, a guillotine blade slammed the ground right in front of them, cutting off their path. It was only then that Juniper noticed someone had built a guillotine in front of the break room. Juniper and Clay screamed and grabbed onto each other, breathing heavily as eyes gazed into eyes. The sexual tension present in all retail jobs hung thick in the air. What the hell was that? Juniper asked, pulling away from her would-be paramour. That thing almost cut us in two. And it did get someone, Clay said, looking down at the guillotine blade in horror. It was only then that Juniper noticed Joanne, who worked in fabrics, bisected on the floor, her pretty little organs spilling all over the formerly clean linoleum. Clay sadly shook his head. She was about to get a $20 gift card for her 5-year anniversary.
Silence!
The voice echoed around them again, setting their every nerve to tingle. Juniper and Clay listened, clamming up like silenced mollusks.
Elm Grove is a city with a sordid history of dark and mysterious deaths. Every unsolved terror is present here. Every spirit is alive in this Halloween superstore.
But why? Juniper cawed like a raven. Why a Halloween superstore?
Silence!
The voice spat. A rubber bat flew from the darkness and struck Juniper right in the craw. She shrieked like a brain-dead marmot and keeled over backward. What do we have to do with it? Clay asked the disembodied woman. There was a crack of thunder, and he, too, tasted the wrath of Rubber Bat.
You are the descendants of the 2 oldest families in town. You have taken this place to its highest highs, and you have brought it to its lowest lows with not a care but for your wicked own self-gain. You will pay the price.
But why a Halloween superstore? Juniper shrieked. There was a crack, not unlike the sound of a secret mechanism releasing, and a plastic skeleton swung down from the roof, smartly striking her in the noggin. My 7th great-grandfather founded Elm Grove, Clay whispered in delicious terror. Don't admit it out loud, Juniper warned.
We already know!
The voice roared.
You must survive the haunting, then your family's debt to society will be paid!
And if we don't survive? Juniper asked, her voice small, like a speck of moss on Elm Grove's famous Elm Tree Grove.
Then you die, and your family legacy ends.
The voice was right. Both Juniper and Clay were only children. They had no cousins. If they died, the Moonbranch and Potter lines died with them. Why these mysterious forces had chosen to set up shop in a craft store building was anyone's guess, but the malice in this character's voice told Juniper it wasn't to be trifled with. Did your ancestors kill someone with a guillotine? Juniper asked Clay, staring at the bladed weapon. Maybe, Clay shrugged. I mean, probably, yeah. Juniper looked at him, horrified. At that moment, chanting filled the room, in a language Juniper had never heard before. It sent chills down Juniper's spine. On the walls, the shadows of 5 women dancing around a fire played like shadow puppet theater. Witches, she whispered. Elm Grove had been one of the most active towns in the country for witch hunts, though it often got overshadowed by its more prolific neighbor, Salem.
My sisters are here to say hello.
The voice creaked around them. Suddenly, A daisy chain of jack-o'-lanterns snaked down from a shelf and wrapped themselves around Juniper's delicate throat. They constricted, lifting her off her pitiful feet as they retracted from whence they came.
Do something,
she croaked at Clay. The chanting continued, and, suddenly, temporary tattoos of haunted houses, witches, and zombies floated around her like fall leaves, adhering to her skin, leaving behind markings of the Halloween season. Clay ran to a nearby plastic skeleton, ripped off its arm, and whipped it around in the air, hitting nothing. "Back!" he squealed. "Back, you blasphemous fiends!" Juniper groaned as the temporary tattooing continued. It felt like 40 stingless jellyfish were flopping around her dermis.
Not helping,
she shouted to Clay through clenched teeth. Hold on! Clay searched around the aisles until he found something else. He came back with a large box of bat and pumpkin glitter. He opened the box and blew the glitter into the air. Juniper coughed as the plastic orange bats flew into most of her orifices. The glitter hit an invisible force controlling the Halloween novelties, and the chanting ceased, peeling off into high-pitched keens. The shadows disappeared from the walls. Juniper dropped back to the ground with an incredible thunk. But the temporary tattoos remained. How long would they last? Only the spirits haunting this Halloween store could know.
"We have to escape,"
Juniper whispered in fear. "How?" Clay shrieked, exasperated. "There's hundreds of Halloween novelty displays between us and the exit. We'd never make it." "Then think," Juniper shouted. "What else could our families have done? What will this Halloween superstore do next?" Came the undeniable sound of children giggling. "Clay, what did your family do to children?" "Nothing, I swear. What did yours do?" Clay asked. Juniper didn't know, but oh, how she wished she had done her family tree assignment in grade school. Suddenly, dozens of children wearing ghost costumes made from sheets with eye holes cut in them appeared and surrounded Clay, carrying lit torches aloft and laughing.
"A fire!"
Juniper whispered, horrified. And she remembered then an old family story about her great-great-grandmother's clothing factory burned to the ground. Child labor. The children, tittering like tots on a Christmas morn, lit Clay up like a Christmas candle. He screamed as his clothes caught fire. Burnt boils burst his skin apart, and the terrible smell of burning flesh, accompanied by his wails of agony, filled the retail space. "Moonbridge, stop them!" Clay screamed. Juniper whipped through the aisle of Halloween decorations, searching like a pirate searching for treasure, and finally found a bunch of snow globes with Halloween scenes and leaves instead of snow inside of them. She held a graveyard one over Clay's head and, using the skeleton's arm, busted it. Water and broken glass rained down upon him. He screamed as the glass cut into his medium-rare flesh, but the water extinguished the flames upon contact. Juniper continued, smashing one spooky snow globe after another. The ghost children screamed as the fire snuffed out, just as their lifelights had so many centuries ago. Finally, after Juniper had cleared the entire shelf of snow globes, Clay was extinguished. The children vanished into the shadows of that accursed retailer, little screams accompanying them as they faded into the walls. Clay caught his breath and touched the burns that had popped up all over his exposed skin. "Ouch," he said. Juniper's mind raced like a Clydesdale on steroids. Why was this happening now? Why was this happening to her?
"I know what you're thinking,"
the voice crackled.
"Why me? Why now? I'll tell you this, revenge has no expiration date. We are the town's retribution, and you are our sacrificial lambs."
Juniper and Clay looked at each other, terrified. But they couldn't ruminate on any of this, because, at that moment, a giant clown structure with a gaping black hole for a mouth which looked like an entrance to a funhouse, dropped down toward them. It would have fallen on them if Juniper hadn't pulled Clay out of the way, just like that time with the guillotine, which had only actually happened 10 minutes ago. Eerie circus music protruded from the clown structure. A high-pitched, clowny cackle pierced into their ears like knives. Clay, what's up with the clowns? Juniper asked, forcing her hands over her ears to dull the horrific sounds. Oh, I had an uncle who was a serial killer. He dressed up as a clown to hunt people on Halloween. Oh? Juniper squawked. The funhouse entrance was now on the ground. Through the darkness and mist of the man-made fog, out stalked zombie clowns. One after another they came, in clown makeup and oversized shoes, with terrifyingly disfigured faces and heads hanging onto sliced necks by a thread. And they had knives. The lead clown slashed out at Juniper, and she didn't have time to move. A slice pried open the skin on her arm. The most crimson of liquids, that being blood, flowed over the temporary tattoos like a bloody river, down her bicep, and her ulna, and her wrist. It pooled in her hand, and she stared at it in terror. Her blood, her family's blood, exposed. She would never look at her blood the same way again, and boy, would she soon have a lot of it to look at. The second clown grabbed Juniper around the chest, pulling her into its ghastly arms, like a hug from something you never want a hug from. He pushed his own blade into her throat, and she could feel the blood already seeping out.
Clay, she wheezed. Help me.
Clay, who had been staring at the clowns, frozen in fear, finally leapt into action. He grabbed a pimp cane from the costume aisle and swung it at the clown that had Juniper in its clutches. Its head popped off like a wine cork. The molded, mutilated noggin thudded onto the ground, staring up at them with re-dead eyes and a grotesque smile. Juniper grabbed her neck in relief, grateful for the solid head she still had on her shoulders. But the clown behind the decapitated one grabbed the knife from the floor and went for Juniper again, stabbing her in the back over and over like a deadly paper punch. She screamed in pain, and Clay struck that clown with the pimp cane. Over and over it happened, like a macabre assembly line. The clowns grabbed and stabbed Juniper. Clay smacked their heads off, and it started again, until they got through all 8 clowns. All 8 of Clay's uncle's victims. Juniper couldn't believe what she was seeing. Smashed undead circus freak heads, torsos and limbs that had separated from each other, painted on mouths still smiling. The department store floor was littered with pieces of zombie clowns who had once been human men. "We can't go on," Juniper cried. "Are you mortally wounded?" Clay asked, rushing over to examine the holes in Juniper's Snippet's uniform, which now squirted blood-red hemoglobin like his brand-name breakfast waffles had spewed syrup. "No, it's just, our families did this. We are, in some ways, ancestrally culpable." Clay's face fell. "What do you mean? We should just let ourselves be killed?" "Yes!" Juniper shouted. "It's what we deserve. Look at what our families did to all of these people. And I don't even know the half of it."
There's only one way for my revenge hunger to be sated,
the voice intoned.
A 2-course meal of death and destruction, and both of you are the main 2 courses.
"You don't mean," Juniper began right before a rubber bat struck her in her cranium.
Yes! Mortal Kombat!
Juniper scoffed and sputtered. "We aren't going to fight each other." But when she turned around, she saw Clay, already holding a Grim Reaper's sickle from the costume department. "Clay, you've got to be kidding. It's made of plastic. It's not even sharp."
Whoever wins gets to go on living!
Clay rushed towards her with the sickle, and though Juniper didn't know what kind of damage a plastic weapon could do, she took off. She ran beyond the costume aisles, deeper into the store, She reached rows of special effects makeup and, for a moment, as she stared at a prosthetic nose, she considered putting on a disguise. But that wouldn't work. The only two people in the store were her and Clay, and that strange, disembodied voice. Clay was right behind her now. He swatted at her with the sickle, catching the tie of her apron and slicing it off. She gasped and with all her might pushed over the rack of makeup.
Shit!
Clay yelled as he jumped back and out of the way. The rack smashed to the floor, breaking jugs of fake blood, the artificial crimson oozing out like the craft paint that, 12 hours ago, would have been sold on these very shelves. Juniper leapt over the thick puddles, but Clay didn't see them. He slipped on the fake blood, falling backwards and hitting his head on the floor. But Juniper wasn't sure if he was dead or still pursuing her, so she kept running. She came to a horrifying room full of inflatable lawn decorations. A floating witch cackled at her. A puffy vampire, losing air, swooped down upon her like a bat. She screamed and flailed, trying to free herself from the maze of floppy nylon, which gave her the impression of a deflated parachute. She tore herself away from the vampire's grasp and moved on through the creatures. A smiling ghost with a purple wizard's hat, a dragon breathing orange and black flame, a jack-o'-lantern with illuminated yellow eyes and some kind of spidery creatures coming out of its top. In a yard, these would be kitschy and fun, but in this room, in her current state of mind, Juniper thought of them all as monsters, looming above her and ready to strike, ready to suffocate her and leave her for Clay Potter's picking. She swatted her way through them like a child in a cornfield. The ones she couldn't push aside, she killed, stomping their power buttons until they dissolved back to the tile floor. When she finally reached the other side of the room, she was stopped by a dead end. The door that had been here when it was a craft store, the door to the storage room, was welded shut. Juniper yanked on it over and over, but it wouldn't budge. Footsteps stalked toward her, echoing around the room. Clay was coming, and she was no longer hidden by inflatables. Her reckless movements had revealed a clear, visible path between her and the enemy. She looked into Clay's eyes, those eyes she had once thought might hold love, or something more. But now they were just cold, like the fans that held up the very inflatables in this room. His face was covered in fake blood, his beady eyes staring out of it. He lumbered toward Juniper with his sickle aloft. "Wait," she said, her voice small and shaking. "You don't have to do this. This whole thing is probably just a prank." "It's you or me, Moonbranch. My family always picks ourselves. It's written on our family crest." "But you can change it," Juniper begged. She wanted to make him see reason. But as he whipped his sickle out, slicing through each fallen inflatable, she saw that reason was long gone. He got within arm's reach of her, and she stared at him, her fear palpable, puffing out of her glands like scent from a name-brand air freshener. "I haven't told you what else my family is," Clay growled as he loomed over her.
Vampires!
The voice around them hissed. Clay looked up, annoyed. "You ruined it!" "What?" Juniper asked, horrified. "Vampires?" She didn't believe in vampires. "Surprise!" he said, and suddenly, two fangs, sharp as needles, protruded from his gums. She believed in vampires now. He dropped the sickle and ran his tongue around the fake blood, cleaning it off his face. Juniper watched in terror. "Ugh!" he spat. "That's nothing compared to the real stuff. You know who had the best blood? Your friend, Alondra." Juniper couldn't breathe. This man she'd been so attracted to had killed her friend? Sucked her very blood dry? Before Juniper knew what was happening, Clay lunged toward her exposed neck, open-mouthed. She screamed and kicked him in the groin. He fell to the floor in pain. Even vampires couldn't handle a heel to the balls. She rushed around him, racing back toward the doorway. She got back out to the main part of the store and booked it to the entrance. But then, she smelled the smoke. She stopped in her tracks. The ghost children were floating around the store, lighting every piece of merchandise on fire, the flares accompanied by hollow giggles. And then, The silhouette witches were doing spells that made the flames rise. Suddenly, they were surrounding Juniper, tall and wavering walls of orange. She'd never been this terrified. She tried to find a way out of this ring of fire, but there was no exit. And then she heard Clay's shoes smacking the tile floor. "There's no way out," he said, impossible fear swirling on the vampire's face. "We're trapped." "Good," Juniper replied. She deserved to die. They both did. Hell, their entire families should be put to the guillotine. They'd all been complicit in years, decades, centuries of torture. They had to end this. The ghost children had floated back to the ground, and they ran around the two of them in circles, carrying the bright torches behind them like mortal children might carry a kite. "The moon branches and potters were parasites," Juniper monologued. "Blights on the Elm Grove. We have to end our family lines. Today." She had never felt so brave. She'd never stood up for a cause like this. After all, she was merely a department store cashier. "You're out of your mind!" Clay began to yell, but the fire consumed him from toe to head. Juniper watched in horror, plugged her ears to drown out the vampire's screams. She knew she was next. She closed her eyes, bracing herself. But then, applause came from around her. She opened her eyes. A witch materialized before her. Not a novelty one with a funny black hat. A real one in a long white dress from the 1600s, with burns and filthy bare feet.
Good job! You killed him, and you've learned your lesson,
The witch said.
You may go.
Who are you? Juniper asked, entranced by this woman.
I am the witch they couldn't burn. I cursed them and they trapped me in a curse of their own. They buried me alive in a coffin, and I had to wait these 300 and some years for that curse to break so I could come back and enact my revenge. I meant to kill all the Moonbranders too, but it seems somewhere along the line they got it right. Go now, before I change my mind.
A ghost child had a hose and was squirting it into the flames, clearing a path for Juniper to leave. But I deserve to die. My family. It's horrible, Juniper said, reaching for a torch to douse herself in flames.
You have the power to change things. It's your purpose,
the witch said. Juniper could go on living. She could do the Moonbranch name right. She could prosecute her evil family members. She could avenge Alondra and all the other missing persons. And now that she knew the Potters were vampires, she had to kill them. She took a deep breath and followed the ghost child to the front door. They exchanged nods of understanding, and the automatic door spread wide for her to pass. Juniper walked out into the morning light with a new lease on life, a new purpose. She turned around once more toward the Haunt-o-Ween, preparing herself to see that evil, dark storefront. But it was, once again, acid green. The S on the snippet sign hung limp and half-crooked. Juniper rubbed her horrified, tired eyes. Her every hair follicle smelled of smoke. Her fresh tattoo still hurt. It had happened, all of it. And though the store was back to normal again, Juniper Moonbranch never would be. She got on her bicycle and pedaled off into the streets of Elm Grove, ready to repair a dark and storied history. And, oh yeah, kill some vampires.
So how did that feel?
Awful. It was just like I was back in his library.
I see. Well, there's always next week.
Next week? For what?
Another installment of Immersion Therapy!
This episode was performed by Charles Brock and Stacey Milbourne. It was edited by Stacey Milbourne, Michael Morgan, and Lord Serpent. Haunt-o-Ween was written by Stacey Milbourne and Lord Serpent. It was produced by Stacey Milbourne, Michael Morgan, Charles Brock, and Lord Serpent. Michael Morgan and Lord Serpent were the audio engineers. The music was composed by Stacey Milbourne, Mike Morgan, and Charles Brock, and Lord Serpent. Tune in next week for even more evil terror tales of horrific madness. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Lord Serpent's Library and check out my homepage at rss.com/podcasts/Lord Serpent's Library.